And if you tell me something about Boo Unison or Soul Striker, we're gonna have problems. Hey everybody, it's B here, and we are back with the videos. I was taking some time off this past week. I was in Seattle visiting a buddy, but now we are back here, and unfortunately, well, fortunately for the community, a new list dropped. Emergency ban list. Something that I think everyone's been calling out for the past couple of weeks. Not only based on, some things that they missed from the previous list, but showing off that even the things that they did hit weren't functional enough to really prevent the decks that they were trying to temper down from being overly represented in the meta. Overall, I think we're just going to talk about my general opinion piece on what I think it's all going to, this means not only for the meta moving forward, but what this means for cross spirits, what it means for non-tier 1 decks moving forward, and kind of just going over, the general idea of what the ban list is and what it'll do for us moving forward. Real quick, guys, of course, before we get started, if you want to pick up any cards from Cross Spirits, now that the set is infinitely more playable, I have to point you guys over to 3 Mana Inc., the best place in Canada to get your DBS singles and sealed product guaranteed. And if you want to watch me pilot some spicy decks, I am looking to explore Cross Spirits as well as the anniversary box once that gets released. Link to Twitch is in the description below. I stream, I don't know, most days of the week. But quickly, let's go over the ban list itself. So the theme for the original ban list that took place a few weeks ago was free play. They recognized that players were really frustrated with the state of the game in terms of having to deal with multiple decks that can attack, a dozen or so times, at which spending almost no energy to get there. Even though that theme was identified, the ban list didn't really get there altogether, with hits of Heartfelt Plea and limits to cards like Bardock the Resolute, which those decks are playing it at 1 or 2 copies anyway, so it didn't really do much. But generally speaking, they had the right idea, the execution was lacking, and on things that they did hit, like Dark Broly, I think the consensus, based on some tournament results after the ban list, was that Dark Broly was still going to do what Dark Broly was going to do, even if defensively it can't shotgun it or protect itself as well. So the quick plays that they decide to go back and hit on this ban list are things like Mercenary Tau, Bardock the Resolute, and Belmont, which those are like the 3 big targets for the red turn 2 kill deck in King Vegeta. The biggest thing I think here being Belmont. The Belmont being able to get around the unique key, which means that you can start playing more Mercenary Taos and a bunch of other cards, really is what set the deck apart. Plus it's removal too, which is kind of bust. So generally these 3 cards being completely banned now is a huge boon for the game in terms of being able to mitigate what aggro is doing now. The game no longer becomes as much about floodgate or die, which it felt like if you weren't the aggro deck, that's what you had to do in the game, which, I've touched about in my previous ban list video, doesn't really make the game feel like it's skill-based when it comes down to just being able to see my 1 defensive card to make sure it doesn't die. Additionally, on the ban list, we have Son Goku Power of Legend, and I kind of get why. It's not like this card has seen an incredible amount of play right now, specifically because hand destruction decks have been, they're good, but they haven't been the #1 place in the meta because of all the aggro. So I think this is one of those few forward-looking bans that say, all right, well, based on the fact that we dealt with aggro this much, not only do we already have a theme of dealing with free play and wanting to prevent that from being such a big issue in the game, but additionally, we just want to make sure that we hone down the power of hand destruction decks, knowing that they're probably going to come up and have a resurgence when all these aggro decks get tempered. Finally, on the ban list, Mecha Frieza finds its way on the ban list. I think this is one of the few bans where we really thought, yeah, this is exactly what they should have done, and then they just went off and banned Universe 7 Rep instead. So with that banning, Universe 9 Assemble is back in the game, completely unbanned, which is nice. I think it's the 2nd unban this game has ever had. But either way, it's great that the Universe 9 decks that we're playing these, which, let's be real here, there weren't that many competitive decks playing this card, do get their card draw and free play of Universe 9 back. And here's the thing, Mecha Frieza wasn't making huge splashes once the ban happened. Yes, Universe 9 Assemble was one of the most powerful things the deck could do because it's what allowed it to plus so incredibly well and be able to get the hand advantage it need to be able to kill your opponents. I still stand that from a card design standpoint, Mecha Frieza is a bit too wide-ranging in the things it can do. It heavily limits design space, and I think the game is just better off with it being gone. Which sucks, because I did buy my copy of Mecha Frieza. Like, I never played the deck, but I had the card saying one day if there's a variant of Mecha Frieza I want to play, I'll get to, and I don't get to do that anymore. But I think for the health of the game, it is significantly better that way, and Universe 9 Assemble is back. You know, not that it was an incredibly playable card outside of Mecha Frieza, but it is, you know, something that those decks have an option to do now, which they didn't anymore. On the limited end, we have King Piccolo, the new ruler. I'm pretty okay with this. You know, in the grand scheme of cheap double strikers that, you know, we have Tapion now for blue, for example. I do think that this one is still pretty pushed versus those. Free is, you know, infinitely more valuable than one energy. But now that it's limited out one, you can not see it as much. If you do so, you can kind of play around it. And at least if you dealt with the first copy, you're not going to be seeing the second, third, fourth, or, you know, however many copies that the red decks would be playing. So not too bad. And then on the other side of the limit, we do have Janemba Bewitching Blow. I'm sad about this. You guys know I love my blue-based aggro decks. And Janemba has almost always been a centerpiece of those decks that I'm playing. Now, do I think blue aggro is dead without it? No, I think blue aggro can still do plenty of things. I just think Janemba is a fantastic extender to what those decks are doing. But based on the theme of the ban list, I think it was a good hit. I think it's one of those that, hey, if we really restrict the power levels of these red aggro decks, then we really need to hone in blue, because blue is definitely in a position right now where it's arguably one of the best colors in the game now. You know, Soul Striker is super powerful, being like the king of mid-range. Baby can still do its thing, although, I mean, we're going to talk about an errata that Planet Tuffle got, but I think, you know, it's still definitely doing its thing. So I think this is one of those preemptive hits where they told themselves, based on what the meta is going to look forward past this ban list, I think it's something that we need to hone in if we really want to hone in quote-unquote free aggro. So I get it. I'm sad because I like the card a lot, especially since it's arguably one of the most fair free play cards, but I get it. On the errata side, Dark Broly has finally been honed in. For those guys who, you know, have been kind of paying attention to what Dark Broly has been doing post ban list, nothing really changed. Yes, the deck wasn't as strong defensively because you couldn't just unload your entire board into your leader, and it's not as strong offensively because you can't just shotgun your board into your opponent. But that doesn't change the fact that it is a deck that aggressively can pump out multiple 30Ks for free, turn after turn after turn, keeps on recycling them. You can, I mean, Broly decks are including Belmonds now so that they could Belmond away their Dark Brolys and then play more Dark Brolys. It just goes to show how stupid Belmond was. But either way, the Dark Broly package has been reined in. Now they all cost one specified black to be able to be played out, which I think is very, very, I think it's balanced to a point where the deck is no longer competitive. Here's the thing, guys, though, I don't think the deck is dead. I think it is playable, and if you play Dark Broly, you could do it to some moderate success at the locals levels, just because it's still really good to get a beefy 30K that can remove something on board, protect you, remove a card from your opponent's hand. Like, it's still good. It's just not free, which is absolutely busted. It means you're getting one out a turn instead of 3-4 of them. I'm pretty okay with that level of balance. So I think this is finally the hit that Dark Broly absolutely needed to be able to rein it in and to be able to, because Dark Broly is one of those decks where you can either deal with it or you can't. And it's one of the decks in the previous meta that was find a floodgate or you lose. And then when it started incorporating the Gogeta package, now it's find a floodgate that deals with my 30Ks, but that doesn't deal with the 10 and 15Ks that the Gogeta package allows me to attack you with. You know, so deal with that instead. So now you have to fight the deck on two different angles, which can be very difficult to do. So this is one of those erratas where I feel finally it's going to allow more decks to be able to breathe in the meta. Now, I don't specifically think that this ban list in any way is really going to push any cross spirit decks into the meta, and we're going to touch a bit more about that afterwards. But Dark Broly being reined in means that a lot of decks that just could not deal with it can now breathe some air and are at least playable to an extent, whereas they couldn't be if you were end up facing against Dark Broly with whatever brew you were trying to bring up. To wrap up the erratas, Planet Vampa now only works if you have no battle cards on the board. So it's a starter to your engine, but it no longer extends your engine. This definitely reins in the power of Red Broly. It lowers its consistency, but it's not the end all be all. I think the deck is still very much playable. You just gotta play it a bit differently. It is less powerful, but I think if you want a red aggro deck and you like what Red Broly does, I don't think this change necessarily makes a deck unplayable. I just think it makes it not as powerful, not as consistent. Planet Tuffle additionally only works if you have no battle cards on board. I don't think this completely changes how Baby plays. I think Baby still plays an incredibly good game plan. I think some decks will just not be able to deal with Baby. But you just have to account for your turns like 3, 4 a little bit differently. Where, having a Gohan on board could very much limit what your following negates can do, or what you're going to do with your energy afterwards, or if you even have the energy to be able to do that. Right? A lot of plays that people would make would be to Gohan and then, Revenge Big Bang, something of the sort. That may actually not be possible with having Gohan on board now. Or if you already have something else on board, make Yorps, as an example, become significantly less good because now it is a negate that comes off for 1 and replaces itself. But now that it's on board, it turns off the rest of your negates, and the rest of your negates are more Floodgate E, which I think is more important to the deck itself. So in that front, I think it does change the playstyle some in terms of how the mid game plays out. But I do think it is something that Baby players can play around. You can overload away most of your targets anyways. So I think it is something that while it definitely reins in and hones in the power of the deck, I think good Baby players should be able to play around this, and don't expect the deck to be completely gone. Definitely we'll see less of it in the field, but I think it's not something that's going to go away for good. The one place I think they overdid. Here's the thing. I'm not super happy about how they limited Janemba. But it's fine. I'm not over it. Everything else I think has been super solid hits. I think King Piccolo is fine, whatever. The Dark Broly stuff, everything's been pretty solid. I think Young Invaders was a bit overboard. Young Invaders now costs 1 specified red to be able to give your opponent a baby, a Young Invader, or it costs 1 specified red now to give yourself a Young Invader. And I think that's a little bit much given how King Vegeta lost all the free play stuff between Bardock the Resolute, Mercenary Tau, and Belmont. King Piccolo is now at 1, so you just gotta deal with the 1, which is definitely doable. I think you basically just kill the strat that the deck was meant to play with by doing this. Again, I don't think the deck's unplayable. I think switching gears for 1 energy is still okay value. It's infinitely worse than for no energy. But I think this is one of those changes where they saw a deck and they know how much players weren't into it, and they went a little bit too hard on it. I don't know if there's any players I talked to who felt like the Young Invaders hit was necessary. I think the deck was very good at what it did with the Young Invaders there. But I mean, at worst, the Young Invaders, if your King Vegeta opponent wasn't hitting you at all with their leader, you were going down to 5 or 4 life by turn 3, turn 4. That's fine. Especially with all the free play gone, I think that was no longer an issue, and I do actually think the deck took a bit too many hits. As you guys know, I don't look to ban or errata to kill decks, but to fix formats. If the format needs fixing, then yes, some decks need to take hits. But I think, Dark Broly took multiple hits, but I think it's still a playable archetype. Is it as good? No. Is it as competitively viable? No. But I think it is still a playable archetype. I don't think I can say the truth for King Vegeta. I think King Vegeta, the way the devs would have wanted us to play it, is significantly worse, if not just flat out dead, because Young Invaders doesn't do it. Now, I've seen some people still play King Vegeta anyways, because the unawakened side to look at top 5 and grab a Saiyan is still pretty powerful. You get to search a super combo. On the low end, on the high end, you can find an answer for what your opponent's doing. So it's still a very powerful leader in that front, and he does have the removal on the back that combos really well with everything that Red's trying to do. But it's a shame because I really liked the Young Invaders archetype, and I think that aspect of King Vegeta has gone significantly worse and slower now that Young Invaders cost an energy. Overall, though, I think this is a very successful ban list. I think this is very close to what the ban list should have looked like. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of stuff from the other ban list that definitely makes sense here. If this was one big ban list, the hitting the Sin Shenron deck makes sense. So hitting Cell Xeno and Pan Great Whisper, fine. I still think Heartfelt Plea was fine, but I mean, okay. So on that front, I think it's a very successful ban list in what it's trying to do. And it definitely brings up the playability of Cross Spirit up. The issue that I was alluding to earlier with Dark Broly was that a lot of these top tier decks, Dark Broly, King Vegeta, Baby, they are so incredibly good at what they do that they force certain types of play styles out of the meta. You can't play, slower mid-range decks when you're dying on turn 2. You can't play slower mid-range decks when your opponent's attacking you with 30Ks 4, 5, 6 times a turn on top of, the Gogeta package, which that in itself does an incredible amount of damage, as well as board removal. So these decks were really preventing other strategies from arising. Now, I'm not saying tier 1, and this is the note I want to say. I don't actually think this ban list makes any set 14 archetypes tier 1. Jiren kind of becomes a de facto aggro deck now, being one of the easier ones to be able to aggress on turn 2 and 3. U7 Gohan's still like fine. The blue decks come up in playability a bit, just because they're better, placed out in the meta. But I don't think any cross spirit deck sits at tier 1. Some of them might sit at tier 2. I could definitely see that with, like I said, Jiren. I know some people are playing Xeno Dragons. That looks like it's viable to an extent. So while I do think it brings up the playability, it doesn't make it tier 1. But that's the thing. Cross Spirit felt like almost completely unplayable in the face of what the meta was looking like, as far as the tier 1 competitive meta goes for. Now it feels like you could actually take them to a tournament and do pretty okay with them. I don't think they're winning anytime soon, and I'm really okay with being proven wrong. But I do think that some of these archetypes that were fringe are now strongly playable, and I think the ones that just were unplayable, you can now actually take them to a table, and you're not just power. I won't even say power crept because they came afterwards, but just leveled out of the game because what your opponent was doing was so much more in terms of value and pressure than what you were doing, which I think is just fine. I do believe that the devs are trying to pull in the level of the game based on the anniversary box, based on what we saw with Cross Spirit. It does seems like, based on what happened with the first 3 sets of Unison Warrior, this set Cross Spirit moving forward, they're really trying to bring it back in. Those efforts meant nothing when you didn't do anything to the power level of the decks from the previous sets that were preventing new strategies from coming out. Now it feels like, while there are definitely some tier 1 strategies, and a lot of them have been existing for multiple sets, and they're not the new stuff, it feels like there's room to breathe for the new stuff to maybe break through, maybe make waves. Helku's another deck that I think was doing pretty okay and now has a bit more room to be able to do its thing. So I think there is more room now in the game to be able to see those things break through, whereas previously, between Baby, Dark Broly, King Vegeta, that wasn't possible based on what those decks were capable of doing, which I think is definitely a good route for where the game should go, and hopefully brings in with the new design space that they're trying to explore with Spirit Boost. In set 15 and 16, most likely I can definitely see that being the theme that they're going to stick with for the next couple of sets. Then I think it leaves room for the game to be more creative, for us to be able to explore more decks and not be punished as hard for it, and definitely open up the meta to evolve, which I think it had become pretty stagnant from that point forward. But with that said, guys, that's just my piece. Instead of doing like a big winners or losers opinion piece on it, Joey's going to do that way better than me. I think just giving my just general thoughts about what it did, what it's going to do for the game, I think is going to be is generally where I want to tackle this. But with that said, guys, I would love to guys let me know. Here's the thing. I'm gonna ask you guys to let me know what you think of the ban list down below. And if you tell me something about Boo Unison or Soul Striker, we're gonna have problems. I think those cards are fine. I think blue mid-range being one of the best decks leaves a lot of room for the meta to not only tackle it, because they do have bullets that hurt it, but also just evolve. Trust me, blue mid-range being the best deck when it turns on at turn 4 onwards is fine. The meta has so much room to explore how to beat it and how to evolve, and I think that's the biggest thing. But yeah, now with that pretext said, if you guys want to let me know what you think of the ban list, what would you guys do differently, how you guys think the meta is going to be moving forward, and what you look forward to playing now that the ban list is down, let me know in the comments down below, guys. I'd love to see your opinions. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Hey, if you dislike it, give it a thumbs down. If you watch more of the videos, guys, we are pumping out content. I am on that grind. Subscribe button's in the corner. There is a giveaway coming out soon. Video should come out tomorrow, so you definitely want to be subbed for that. And with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ciao.